There is a land of which you do not know. There is a light that will always show. Give me a lesson in unsaid things from the greatest talker in the world. Did you make the dream high? Raise it up, raise it up high, raise it high, raise it up high, raise it.
This is Chris Harford, and you're listening to Weencast.
Weencast, a Ween podcast with Shane and Rory.
Hey, what's up? This is Shane, and you're listening to Weencast. Welcome to a new episode. I am flying solo today because Rory has just been super slammed, but it's okay because we're going to cut the intro short anyway because we have got a lot to get to. We have got a very special guest. We were honored to spend some time with the one, the only, the amazing musician and artist, Chris Harford. Chris Harford is such a great guy. He was so generous with his time, and we go over a lot. Not everything, because there is just so much to Chris's career as far as a musician, a producer, an independent record label owner and proprietor, a collaborator. The list just goes on and on. In this conversation, we go back to the early days, including Chris's high school and college bands, including Three Colors, the formation of the Soul Selects record label, moving in with Andrew Weiss, who at the time was working with a very particular young band that we might come to know, the seminal Chris Harford album Beheaded on the Elektra label, working with Mickey on the Choco Dog album Looking Out for Number 6, and we jump forward to today with some of Chris's current projects, like working with Mark Mulcahy from Miracle Legion and Polaris, and teaming up with the very groovy instrumental band Channel Collective, which is the cool music you're hearing in the background right now. Please go to soulselects.com, that's soulselects.com, to check out all of the Chris projects that you can purchase via download, vinyl, or CD. Or go to chrisharford.com, CHRISHARFORD.com. And don't forget to hit us up on patreon.com. We will have an all-new episode of Shane's Ween Vinyl where we discuss, hey, what else? Chris Harford's Looking Out for Number 6 on Choco Dog and Schnitzel Records. The entire unedited conversation with Chris, not to mention tons of other fun, cool, and exclusive material from Rory and myself. Once again, thank you so much to Chris for being so generous with his time, and please enjoy the interview. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I am on the phone with Chris Harford. Thank you so much for being with me today, Chris.
My pleasure, Shane.
It's a real thrill for me. I've been a fan for a long, long time. And I know I wanted to do this for a while, but honestly, you know, in going back through your career and doing some of the research and stuff, it's a little intimidating because there's just so much. There's so many projects and there's so many albums and songs and things. So first and foremost, I want to say there's no way we're going to get to everything today.
Okay.
If that's that's letting myself off the hook. That's
Sounds good.
Yeah.
We're both off the hook then.
Okay. You know, let's kind of go back to you know what I would assume is kind of the beginning for you. So, you know, you're from New Jersey, is that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then you wound up going to college in the New England area.
That's right.
So was Three Colors the first band that you were ever in?
No, I was in a band in high school called Random Joe and the Strillards.
Okay.
And your listeners can look up the song Mormon Blues from our EP. It's out on the streaming services, Random Joe and the Strillards. And that's a hit that my bandmate Sean Keenan wrote. So now we had a band in high school. We were quite good, actually. Original music, played shows locally. And then when I went to school in New England, I met who started the Three Colors band, and we ended up living in Boston and then London.
Wow. Well, can you tell us a little bit about how Three Colors kind of came together?
Yeah, so I decided to go to school in New London, Connecticut, and was in an art class. And I was intrigued by my classmate who didn't really say a word that whole year. But by the end of the first year, we discovered that we liked certain bands, similar bands, and we wanted to try to put a band together by the fall, the next fall. And that was Hub Moore.
Okay.
So he and I started the band, and then we got his brother in the band, and we ended up going to Boston. And that's where I met Dana Colley at the art school there, and he joined the band. So we became a 5-piece for a while there in the 80s.
So it's you and Hub on like guitar and vocals. Is that right? Or Hub was the bass player?
Yeah, he was mostly the bass player, but we would switch sometimes. I would play bass because he became, like a guitar player, singer, songwriter as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then his brother Max on keyboards, and a guy named Barry Stringfellow played drums.
Mm-hmm.
And then we recruited Dana Colley, who played sax.
Who played saxophone? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool, man.
Make a little noise, and you won't get wet, you'll see. Make a little noise and take a little time to breathe. And take it off your head, you won't get wet, you'll see what I mean. And take it off your back and take it off your head, you'll see what I mean. Yeah, you'll see what I mean. 'Cause there's one big tree hanging over me. Oh, oh, oh. There's one big tree.
What does Three Colors mean? Like, what does the name mean?
It was conceptual. It was really supposed to be a logo. I don't know if you've seen like the T-shirts or the album covers, but it's 3 squares of different colors.
Right. So
And
there's a red square, a blue square, and a yellow square.
Exactly. So those, we made T-shirts, and they would be different 3-color boxes. And we in our minds, we never wanted to see it written out. We just wanted to see it like that. But of course, like in newspapers that were just black and white, we soon learned that wasn't going to work. But
Oh, okay. I see.
It's just a logo, kind of like a flag.
Okay.
To this day, the T-shirts look great. They're like very strong concept.
Okay.
But,
So
we got, and then they put the U in our name, and our Boston fans were like, "Well, that's kind of weird." So,
so it's originally supposed to be just that, like, image.
like art students being arty or something. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, because I'm looking at some of like the the releases and the pictures of the album covers and EP covers and stuff like that, and I'm thinking, what am I missing here? Like, I didn't want to ask you like what the name meant. Like, oh, he's just gonna kill me. Like, well, it's obviously supposed to be this. Like
No, nothing's obvious. I guess nope.
okay.
And it's weird. There's some other band was called Three Colors too. Soon after that, so we weren't that original.
Well, I mean, it looks like you were pretty prolific within that time that you were active. And one of the main things that I want to ask you about, I'm a vinyl record collector. I'm not as big as some of the other vinyl guys out there, mainly because I just don't have the room. But I do have a few of your albums.
you don't have the shelf space, you mean, for all the albums you'd like?
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. You know, once I kick my kids out of the house, you know, then maybe I'll take one of their rooms over.
Like,
I'm just kidding.
and expand your library. I get it. Yeah.
But, you know, even back when you were doing the Three Colors Project band, you see your records on the Soul Selects record label.
Yes.
So how is that? Is that something that you started?
Yes.
Okay.
But we started that as a band to just put out our own music then. Yeah.
So how did you do that? Especially back in those days. I mean, how would you guys think to start your own label like that?
Fair question. I think we were pretty clear that we would have to create something on our own if we wanted to get it happening. And we thought, why not start this little label? And then our friends in this band, Treat Her Right, asked us because they liked the label, could they just use basically the logo to put their record out too? So it started to get like spread a little bit, but it was just a way for us to control what we were doing at that moment and just going for it, really.
Mm-hmm. So you would record everything that you wanted on your own, I'm assuming, and then how would you actually get these things made? Like you would have to have a company involved to actually make the records?
Yeah, we did the research and found out who printed the vinyl, and yes, did our own little label and sent it out, all the artwork and everything that, turns out we're doing today, and reviving the name and putting out records. A little easier now, maybe because there's a few more companies to choose from. But
And so from back in those days, like how long from the time that you would sit down and write this music and determine, what you wanted to put on a record, how long would it take then until like the whole thing was done and you would actually get a record like in your hands?
that's an excellent question. You're testing my memory here. I'm sure Hub would remember more clearly. Things were moving pretty fast then, so it didn't take that long. Like I know during COVID most recently, to get some vinyl done, you had to wait maybe over a year. That's since cleared up to now where like you could wait 2 months or get a record, or 2 or 3 months. Back then it might have been like 6 months or something. I'm trying to remember. I actually don't know. I don't know the answer to that, other than the fact that like we recorded it, the first EP, and I'm sure it was out within that year. So it couldn't have taken too long.
Mm-hmm. And then was there a way that you would get these records like distributed, or would you just, keep them with you and sell them at shows?
Basically sell them at shows. Yeah.
Right.
Then it got licensed in England. So a little label in England pressed their own. And we went over there and lived for a bit. So that started happening. But yeah, no, we distributed it ourselves, either driving around to record stores or selling them at shows, really.
Wow. That's amazing, man. I mean, just to see that this independent label, I just find it really admirable. Really commend you for doing that. But is there a story behind the name of Soul Selects?
It's a reference to an Emily Dickinson poem.
Okay.
Which the listeners can Google.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she uses the term soul selects in this poem, and it just struck me as something that sounded cool.
Wow. Well, see, now we're getting some answers here. That's
I realize it could be misleading, or people think it might be a soul music label or something, but
no, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I think music in general just touches your soul. It doesn't have to be quote unquote soul music per se.
Yeah. And then like the Jamaican DJs, the selectors, and they get to choose the next single. So what's choosing that? Their soul's choosing it. That's sort of the way I looked at it back then.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Emily
cool,
Dickinson's line is way deeper and involves like commentary on society, and
right.
Pretty heavy.
Well, so now if you're in this band in the 80s in the Boston area, and then like you said, lived in London, is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So where are you in your career when you start interacting with like Andrew and Mickey and some of the Ween guys then? Because they're a little bit younger than you, am I right?
Well, Andrew's not.
Okay.
So it goes deeper than that. So Andrew and I were in the same class in high school, and Sim was a year younger.
Oh.
I met Sim in 7th grade. He had a Savoy Brown T-shirt, and no one I knew who Savoy Brown was. we struck up a conversation, and he had a British accent, turns out, and we hit it off immediately. And then Andrew, you never really saw at school. I think he skipped school the whole time. He had left the private school. I don't know if he got booted or he left, but so he was only doing like 1 or 2 years at the high school. But I knew him as a bass player, and then those guys had this band called Regressive Aid. I don't know if you've ever heard of Regressive Aid.
I've heard the name, yes.
This is a very, very important and influential band,
Mm-hmm.
certainly on Ween. And
Right.
and they had a guitarist named Billy Tucker, and it was Sim and Andrew as the rhythm section. And they were way ahead of their time, instrumental trio. Amazing live. Three Colors struck up a friendship. We would do shows together. We'd come down from Boston and play City Gardens with them. And Sim and Andrew were living together next to the 7-Eleven by the Circle near Trenton. And one of their housemates was one of the guys that owns the Princeton Record Exchange in Princeton, which is a kind of a world famous record store now. Since you're into vinyl, he now owns it. But so Andrew, when Three Colors did like Full Circle, we kind of ended our career in central New Jersey. We moved into this old schoolhouse, and turns out we were together almost 7 years, which is like longer than the Beatles were together in a way. And we split up in Jersey, and then I ended up moving in with Andrew Weiss in this town here, Hopewell. Andrew still lives in the house that I shared with him. So this would have been this is probably 1988, I want to say.
Okay.
So I'm living in the house with Andrew. He's in the Rollins band with Sim. They're the rhythm section of that. And they're also making a record called Wartime with Henry Rollins. Him and Andrew, they do that Grateful Dead cover. And then I don't know if you've seen their EPs, Wartime.
I do have the LP of Scorn Flakes.
Yeah, that's another group within. So I went to high school with Chris Chang, the singer of Scorn Flakes. That's exactly right. And he was close to Tucker. So it's all people that we know from high school, goes way back.
Okay.
I remember seeing Bill Tucker play, I think with Andrew and his brother John on drums. Of course, John's drummed with Ween, and he's drew the cover art of White Pepper.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's also like the drummer you see in that movie, It's Pat.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Wow. Small world, huh?
Guys, since I was kids, seeing them play, watching Andrew play, being amazed by their ability. And between Sim and Andrew, like they were a crazy locked in rhythm section.
Wow.
So I move in with Andrew, and he tells me that he's working with this band that's going to be one of the biggest bands in the world. And I'm like, oh yeah, what band is that? He's like, Ween. And they were kids, man. They were like 17 or 18.
Right.
Turns out that Mickey remembers he would hang out at radio stations, TSR and PRB, kind of obsessively as like a 15-year-old or whatever.
Right.
And he remembers Three Colors playing live in the studio at WPRB in Princeton.
Wow,
so that
cool.
His first exposure to me and to Three Colors. I don't know if we might have met that day. We might have exchanged hellos or something. He was in there just like obsessing with the record, the vinyl, I think.
Right.
But so then Andrew's like already producing Ween's first record when I move in with him.
Okay. Okay.
And then Andrew and Sim are also on my first record when I get signed to Elektra.
So that's kind of where I was going to go next. So then how did your Elektra, deal come about? How did you go from Three Colors to getting this record made on Elektra?
I had a job. I had a really awesome job working for the album producer, Joe Boyd, who had Hannibal Carthage Records as well. And Joe Boyd was living in London. And for the listeners, he's a fascinating person to look up. And I started, once Three Colors ended, I had met so many musicians on our travels, so many of which I wanted to play music with. I felt like I was free, because Three Colors, we were living in the same house like the Monkees. It was pretty intense and like rehearsing, going through all these different musical styles and stuff. So to be free from that, I knew that I wanted to play with so many musicians. And I started to play a bunch and just like call up friends that I had met. Started playing CBGBs particularly a lot. And I think at that time it was sort of this wave of people getting signed. I got signed in the early '90s, I guess,
Okay.
before Ween signed to Elektra. In fact, I think my A&R guy like had his sights on trying to get Ween.
You know,
use,
I was gonna
use
ask
that
you about that.
use that connection, maybe I would say.
I was gonna ask you about that too, because just looking at the dates of things, you know, your album Beheaded comes out in 1992. And obviously, you know, you're working on it before that, because I think even in the liner notes it says you're working on that since what, 1989.
Yeah, at least, yeah, I guess.
So, you know, it's kind of like, well, that's before Ween shows up on Elektra. So this album is really, you know, sort of like the major label debut of a lot of people, I would assume.
Yeah, yeah. The fold-out CD booklet
Uh-huh.
has the picture of everybody, so it's a
Yep.
really great documentation of everybody that participated in that.
Yes. So
So
I was digging mine out and going through it over the last couple of nights, actually.
So Selects is gearing up to have a vinyl release for that with
Oh, that's amazing. I was going to ask you about that too.
extra artwork and stuff. So that's coming out.
Let me read just a few of the people that appear on that record, and then we can kind of talk about the re-release if it's okay. So
Sure.
for any of the younger fans out there, you know, Ween fans especially. Now, Patrick McCarthy is your producer for this, is that right?
I think in the end, like, I credit him as co-producer. I hired him as the engineer, and then I think I ended up giving him co-production credit.
So he has a huge list of credits: REM, Counting Crows, U2, just to name a couple of them.
Madonna.
Okay, Madonna. So he, I guess, was in the process and going on to have a pretty big career. But also, in addition to you playing on your record, you've got Mickey, Aaron, Andrew Weiss, Claude Coleman, Dave Drywitz, Sim Cain, Hub Moore, so your partner from Three Colors,
Yeah,
Dave Dutton, David Mansfield, Tashi Regan, Richard Thompson, Matt Sweeney, who is one of the guys from Skunk. Is that right?
that's correct. Yep.
And then a
And
mysterious.
Chavez and that band he had with Will Oldham.
Yeah, I mean that's just to name a few of the musicians who appear on that record. There's many more. You have in the liner notes, like you had mentioned, each song has a list of musicians that are part of that particular track. But there's sort of a mysterious character named Marshall Stacks. So can you tell me who that is?
I'm so glad you asked. My daughter was asking me about that the other day, and I don't think she knew what a Marshall Stack was. So, but that was my pseudonym, and I don't know if I get the credit for thinking that up first or I stole that from somewhere, but I decided that would be my producer name.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll see that name on some other records if I'm not using my straight up name.
Right. So what made you do that?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know, really. I felt like maybe separating the two might make sense somehow.
Okay. See, I was wondering if that was like a clever business tactic where you would say, okay, I get paid twice or something if I have two different.
I like the way you're thinking. I should yes, that's exactly what it was.
I don't know.
I feel like I need to renegotiate. You're absolutely right, because
Yeah.
looking back, producers get an extra percentage. I never thought of that. See, you're thinking. It didn't. Needless to say, yeah, it didn't pan out anyways. I could have used your business acumen back then. That's funny. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just sort of like when you look at the back of the booklet, that's sort of like the first name is produced, Marshall Stacks producer, produced by Marshall Stacks, and it's like, what?
Yeah. I'm glad you noticed that. Not that goes over people's heads. So
well, there, and I had a little help from Discogs on that one, because I think that comes up as one of your aliases on Discogs.
Oh, okay.
So I put two and two together.
Okay, gotcha. Part of your research.
But while we're talking about the booklet, so you have a couple of other things on there that get me thinking about being a Ween fan and some of that the olden days there. So you have on there on the thank you section the Zion House of Flesh. So I know that that's something that comes up in sort of like, a lot of the Ween liner notes. So what is that? Is that specifically something that has something to do with Andrew?
Yeah, that's the house we lived in on Zion Road.
Okay. So that was the house that you and Andrew and then what, also Sim lived in?
No, Sim didn't live there. Sim, just me and Andrew. And Andrew had already set up like a studio in the living room, basically.
Okay. Okay. So that's where a lot of like the recordings would be made for you and then probably like the Ween guys coming in?
Not so much me. Ween most definitely. And then around the corner, Greg Fry, who obviously is a key player in this story, had a studio which I would use a lot. And he goes back to being a member of the band The Groceries. And the Groceries were very close with Score and Flake and Regressive Aid, part of the scene that played around here. So that goes way back too.
Okay.
And so Greg Fry ends up being Ween's manager, of course. But he had the studio where I would go mostly. Andrew, at that point, was already deep into Ween and always had projects going on. So very rarely, the one thing we did do together, Andrew and I had a band briefly called Angel Dust. And then, of course, I ended up living with Claude, and he had a studio too. So we would record there. And we brought in Michael Hampton, Kid Funkadelic.
Okay.
That's out now, this like EP of 3 songs that we did. Now it's under Chris Harford, the Angel Dust Sessions, Into the Universe, a version of Joe Strummer's Midnight Dream, and a song called You For Me. And that really shows off Andrew Weiss's genius and his production capabilities that he was doing back then. So that would be an example of something we did do there. Like, I remember sitting on the porch, you'll hear these crickets really loud in the mix. And that's actually like just sitting on the front porch and recording it live.
Wow, that's cool.
But I
That's
know,
cool.
So I'm living in the house. I've moved in, and he's telling me about this band Ween, and he'd also been working with Skunk. So I'd already heard about Skunk and Claude and Matt Sweeney. Claude was actually called Matt then too. There were the 2 Matts before he changed his.
Right. That's one of the things we've talked about on the podcast once or twice, looking at the Skunk LPs.
Yeah. And Andrew had already done that record, I think. So they had a relationship with Twin Tone through that.
Right.
And so the first song I'm hearing blasting downstairs, it's just this rumbling beat over and over. Like, after about 8 or 16 hours, I was so confused because Andrew was saying, this is going to be one of the biggest bands in the world. And finally, like, I hear the song. I can't even wrap my mind around what's happening. I'm just like, what the fuck is happening here? And it was that song Flapjack Jetty?
Big Black Betty Flapjack.
Yeah, Big Black. And so like that, I heard that shit for days, like just that bong, bong, bong. And I was like, what are you talking about? What's happening, And to hear that as like the first realized song, I just was so kind of like, what the fuck?
Flapjack Betty, Big Black Betty, Jenny, the little spider Jenny, come, Black Jack, Jack, Big Black Betty, little spider Jenny.
And then Mickey would come to the house and jam with us in the basement, Sim and Andrew and Mickey, and he was green. He was young and he was so enthusiastic, but he hadn't really he was just learning. So to watch him from that moment to then see him as one of Rolling Stone's greatest guitarists of all time, it's pretty amazing to see that trajectory from the inside, personally. It was like, wow, this is crazy.
Wow,
So,
that's great, man.
That's the connection to Andrew and Sim. It goes really deep, it's childhood.
Yeah, I mean, it really does seem like a family, kind of dynamic. You just keep seeing the same the same people over and over. It's like, okay, these guys must have been really tight and a real close knit community. But the one other thing, just while we're talking about Beheaded and the booklet, so you have on there, or I don't know if you wrote everything or how the liner notes were put down, but you have on there Ween appears courtesy of whichever records. So does that just mean like, okay, they're in between labels, or?
That's funny. I didn't know that was on there. That's exactly what it must mean. Maybe I knew something was imminent between Twin Tone and Elektra. So
Right.
I was making an inside joke. I totally forgot about that.
That's very interesting. I'm like, whichever records. No, wait, is that a real thing, or is it just that's my geekdom coming out?
Yeah,
I was.
Let's think about that. So like they had already been on Jeff Rusnack's label initially, right? What was that called?
Well, there's the shimmy disc stuff.
Well, the shimmy disc too, but before that, the tape, the cassettes.
Yes, and it's the same as the Scornflakes records.
Yes.
I
should know this, but I've spaced.
I definitely should know this, and I have. As a matter of fact, I have the one, the yellow one,
which is apparently worth a lot of money on eBay now, right?
It is worth a few bucks. Yes.
It'll come to me.
It's on Bird or Prey. Bird or Prey.
That's it. Bird or Prey. Yeah. So Bird or Prey, shimmy disc, twin tone, and then I think I knew something was up, so I might have just tried to make a joke or something.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's really cool. So now, how are you getting the album made? Is this something that you were working on for a while, getting this put on Soul Select Records, or is it something that's just now like sort of resurfaced?
What do you mean, the Beheaded thing?
Yeah.
So now we have to freaking license it back from Warner Brothers. Yeah, from Elektra.
Well, isn't there, and this is somebody who's just a fan, looking at things from, the outside looking in, but isn't there a certain amount of time where you would get it like reverted back to you?
You would think so. And I thought it was like 25 years, which it's already been, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out maybe not so much. So yeah, we have to license it from Rhino to be able to put it out.
So everything that was from that time period then was what, purchased by Rhino, or what? How does it wind up being on Rhino?
So Rhino, I think, just is a subsidiary, and they are responsible for the back catalogs of all those companies that were under the Warner Brothers umbrella, which there were several, I think, right?
Okay.
So they're just sort of responsible for the back catalog, basically.
Okay.
And I thought, like, Steve Garvey from the Buzzcocks, who I've befriended, said he had a friend that worked at Rhino. And I thought maybe going like being legit rather than just like putting it out and seeing if they would send a cease and desist letter, which
Right.
we probably could have done, because it's not like we're going to print that many, and I don't know if anyone remembers it there, but we felt like doing the right thing and being legit about it. So we
Sure, of course,
to that guy, and he basically gave permission first to get it up on the streaming thing. And then we looked into like, we want to put it out. So figured we'd do it like that.
So, and you're not able to just say like, I want this back.
I probably could. I have to look at the contract again or something when that does expire. I remember being disgruntled that it wasn't somehow 25 years in my case or something.
Interesting. And so how long have you been working on this? Is this something that you're recently like coming back to, like I said, or is it something you've wanted to do for years and years?
It's been quietly in the works. One of the guys who helps run Soul Selects is a big fan of that record. And for him, it was like a project. He wanted to put it out on year 33 and a third, being extra clever. 33 and a third anniversary would be
there you go. Okay, that would be fun.
But it turns out like our math was off, so it wasn't really. And then we realized that it didn't matter like what year it is. It's close, like 32, 34. I can't remember now. It's just funny. So he's been wanting to do it forever, and I wanted to do it with the original artwork that I had in mind that Elektra ended up like quickly rejecting, and then quickly choosing some paintings that I had done, which I thought were totally inappropriate for the record and sort of a heartbreaker for me. It was also the first release that did not come out on vinyl, so you can imagine how heartbreaking that was growing up on vinyl and being like what? There's no vinyl? Are you kidding me? So at least like this chance, we get to put out the originally intended artwork, and for me, that'll make me feel better.
So that's interesting. So is it another one of your paintings that was supposed to be the cover?
No, not at all. It was a concept. It was like a concept piece that my friend from high school helped me create with the photographer that took those photos on the back of Beheaded's artwork. So it's sort of a collaboration, but it was a picture. It's a picture of me with my head in my hands, wearing a Boston Bruins jersey that might say Beheaded, because the label didn't want to. They felt that they would have to pay the rights for the use of a hockey jersey. Where like a year later, or whatever, all the rappers were wearing hockey jerseys. It's like,
Oh, okay.
the reasoning was so silly, and they, for such a cool and progressive label, they didn't quite like fully get where I was coming from and all my suggestions about how to market it and what to do with it. And before you know it, it was all over. It went pretty fast.
Well, just in general, while we're still talking about the Electra period and everything, is there anything else that you would have done differently?
That's tough to say looking back on it. You will probably want to have a whole litany of things like, I wish I had done this, but just to accept what happened, and I still feel like it's not dated or anything. That record still holds up.
I think it's a beautiful album. I mean, not that any of your other stuff isn't, but just listening to it again, getting ready to talk to you, you're absolutely right. I think the sound of it is excellent. It doesn't sound like something where it's like, oh, this old, 90s thing. That's a thing that we talk about, especially with Ween, is the diversity is so like rich, it doesn't really get like dated. So I'd say like Beheaded is a great example of that. It's so diverse. It's not like, oh, that's just like a 90s thing.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
I think the recordings, the actual quality of it, I think is amazing.
Yeah, and that's and how wild is it that they let me produce my first record and hire whoever I wanted, and then go record it in Bearsville, at Bob Dylan's studio, whatever, and then mix it at Jimi Hendrix Electric Ladyland. Like,
I noticed that as well.
Like I was in a dream. The whole thing was wild. So to hire like your friends from growing up, to your high school band, to Ween, to then Richard Thompson and Loudon Wainwright and the Proclaimers.
That's right. I should have put them on the list. The guys from the Proclaimers make an appearance.
Yeah, that involves sending tapes to Scotland, 2-inch 24-track tapes that they had to link up the machines to.
Wow. And was that your first time at Bearsville?
Yeah.
Now that's now defunct. Am I right?
I think it's actually not defunct, although I could be wrong about that. But I thought they were still going.
So what is Bearsville like?
Bearsville's cool. It's just it had like a couple of studios and barns, and there was like cottages to sleep in the woods, basically. Just gorgeous.
And I've heard there's two main studio and one sort of smaller one.
Yeah, I think so. Like maybe they called it Studio B. I don't know. But yeah, they had two spaces, and even in the large one, they might have had like an offshoot room too that was smaller.
Okay.
But yeah.
So exactly. What did you get to do there? Now the whole album wasn't recorded there though. Is that right?
That's correct. Because in the end, we ended up choosing the demos that we had made, either with Adam Lassus in Philly or some with Greg Fry.
Okay.
We ended up being like, we can't really. That was the realization, like, this can't really be topped. So then we knew that the album was going to be maybe inconsistent in its sound, at least, much to the chagrin of Pat McCarthy. But he embraced it and made it work, figured it out.
So then what is there pieces on the record that were from Bearsville then?
Oh, yeah, a bunch of it.
Okay.
Rhythm section, all the stuff like Unsaid Things and Swinging Bridge and Sing, Breathe, and Be Merry. That's all from there.
Okay.
And then the bit with Richard Thompson was recorded live at the Bearsville Theater while we were making that. And the rhythm section for Living End was done there. Yeah, so many. The only things that weren't done there would have been Blanket of Snow and Take Me for All I'm Worth, I think. Just those two songs.
Okay. Wow, that's great. And then was this your first time at Electric Ladyland?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to geek out on you so much, but what is that like?
I mean, that's incredible. That's in the heart of the village in New York City, and you go down these steps and you enter that room, and you feel the magic. It's pretty crazy. State of the art
Wow.
board, and just you see a studio at the highest level being run. It's a wild thing to participate in.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad to hear that Beheaded is going to have a second life. And, like I was saying, it's a beautiful record. And I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit if it's okay. I don't mean to skip over any of your other projects or anything like that.
No worries.
But and you were nice enough to sign my copy of Looking Out for Number 6.
Yes.
For a record nerd, this is kind of, and a Ween fan, this is kind of a unique piece because it's the only it's the only vinyl that was made that isn't something from Ween or Moist Boys on the Choco Dog album or the Choco Dog label.
Yeah.
So how did you guys get this? Was this your idea, or was it something that Mickey said, "Hey, let's do something"?
I think it was probably Mickey's idea.
Okay.
He had just moved into the studio that he called the Fountainhead.
Okay.
And yeah, I had a batch of new songs I was working on. And yeah, I think it was his idea.
So this was Mickey's studio that he made?
Well, Ween at that point had a series of studios in different locations, I think, right? So that might have been there were several, like the Pod, I guess that's this first one maybe, or
because this says in the booklet for this album, it says recorded at the fabulous Fountainhead in New Hope, August of 2005.
So as far as you know, as a fan, do you know anything else that was recorded there?
I don't.
Because that to me was like a Ween studio for a hot minute, for like a year or two.
I was gonna say, I think
maybe it was just Moist Boy stuff. I'm not sure really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think up until today and the last 10, 15 years or whatever, he's had his studio where he made like the Diener solo albums.
Right.
So this must have been previous to that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then they had that other studio in the other barn. I can't remember what they called that, but they did a lot of work in there too. And then they had the other studio across the river in Jersey. That was called something else. I'm trying to remember what that was called. It was kind of on a farm.
So is this something where you kind of went in and kind of gave him the control of, hey, whatever you want to do with these? Because I know it says on the liner notes, produced by Mickey and then mixed by Andrew Weiss.
Yeah, it was definitely Mickey driven. Mickey made the shots, decided what to do, decided Andrew would mix it, got in touch with the guy who played pedal steel. He was definitely in the producer seat.
It's kind of funny too, because listening to some of your other things, I just had you on Spotify. We can discuss that later. I know that you're vocal about streaming and everything, but but it's just kind of funny because listening to some of your stuff, and when songs from that record come up, you can tell. I mean, you can hear. I'm not saying anything negative about them at all, because I think it's a great album and a beautiful record as well. But I definitely can hear the Mickey in that record and those tracks.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think for
him playing drums and bass and guitar, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has the most like Ween sounds of any of your like collaborations, if I may.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially since Andrew mixed it too. Yeah.
So that's just a really cool album, especially for fans of you and and them kind of coming together. And it's just, again, being a record nerd and loving the old Choco Dog website and everything like that, and seeing that album kind of come out. It's like, oh, cool, So I think that's another beautiful album.
It came out like it's Choco Dog / some other label, like what, Sanctuary or something. It was some label that was interested in getting Ween, and I think they used that as like an experiment to see if they wanted to work with this company. You know what I mean?
Well, there's the Schnitzel.
That's separate. That's something else.
Okay.
It's like Choco Dog and some other label that didn't pan out. It begins with an R, maybe.
Reincarnate.
Yes, Reincarnate. That was
Okay.
like, that's a subsidiary, like, or they made up that label as part of whatever major it was. And I think maybe Ween, or did Moist Boys put something out on Reincarnate? Somebody, they end up doing that.
I'll have to look that up. I
might have. So I think they might have. Mickey was entertaining the idea of working with said company, and then we're like seeing how they would do. So that's sort of how I remember it. Because that's funny, because I didn't sign anything for that record.
Mm-hmm.
Never talked to any label, and then I guess it was up on the streaming. It was first on I can't remember now. It was Pandora or something, and only on Pandora. And I was thinking to myself, like, hey, I never signed anything. Like, who's getting the royalties here? I like that again, like my naive business sense. I was like, what? Oh.
Well, we're glad to have it as fans. I can tell you that. And
I like that record too, and that's how it held up. That doesn't sound dated to me either.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all. I think it sounds great.
The Mickey's genius too. Yeah.
Well, we'll kind of jump ahead a little bit again here. So, Mark Mulcahy. So, you guys have been friends for a long time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So now he was in the band Miracle Legion.
Correct.
Okay. So you guys sort of ran in the same circles as you guys with Three Colors. Is that right?
That's right. We would share bills with them as Three Colors. Yep.
Okay. So how many times have you worked with Mark?
I was kind of a bunch, actually. I was a huge fan of Miracle Legion, and Mark started sending me words, and I would write music to them quite early on. Then we even did the demos for this, what became Bird Feeder, pretty early on too.
Okay.
That was like in the early '90s.
Oh wow! So
recording demos at Greg Fry's, and we were offered like a demo deal by a major label, but it was such a terrible deal that we turned it down. And then that was it. We kind of like went on with our lives, and then it always bugged me because I thought those demos were so good. I was like, we've got to actually finish this. So we ended up doing it. I don't know if you checked out the Bird Feeder record.
Yes. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you. I do too. I'm really proud of that.
So the songs that are on the Woodstock album, are these songs that you guys wrote together, or it's something where
we wrote those together. I wrote the music and he wrote the words, and we had demoed those in my basement on a 4-track, probably 90, I want to say maybe 94 or 5 maybe. The last song on the record is one of the demos from back then.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So it's been something that's been in the works for that long then.
Yeah. We had that in the kind of canon. It always bugged me because it was never finished. So that was part of like, this impetus sort of to revive the label, or just because there was all this music that I knew was just sitting on hard drives or whatever, not to be listened to, whether it was the Angel Dust sessions or all this other stuff. There's sort of like no end to it. And that was part of the inspiration to get the label going and to start releasing music. And then like the first Blanc to Blanc record was recorded at Mickey's studio in Lambertville, the most recent studio.
Okay.
Yeah, that sort of ties it all in too.
Wow, that's great. So then how did you guys decide where to make the Woodstock record then?
Like I said, that I never let it go. I just was like, I want to finish this.
Mm-hmm.
And we both admired Kevin Salem's production. Of course, Kevin plays the guitar on Blanket of Snow from Beheaded, so we're old friends.
Okay.
And the building you see on the cover art is Kevin's studio where we made it.
Oh, okay. So that's his location where he had you guys come then.
Exactly. That's in Woodstock as well.
Okay. Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I can't recommend this album enough. I'm gonna get the vinyl, but I did download the tracks and listen to them, and the quality is absolutely amazing.
That's a testament to Kevin Salem. He's really talented in the studio.
Now, do you do vocals on this? I mean, it seems like it's mainly Mark on vocals, but is it both of you guys singing together?
People think that it's actually all Mark singing harmonies with himself. He's playing the drums too.
Okay, okay. Wow. I mean, but I feel like I can hear both of you, not just as far as the vocals go, but I can hear both of you guys in it.
He,
Uh,
he's such an influence on me that like people sometimes think that it is me, but I try to imitate him, I think.
no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't
He
say
has that
at all.
ability, kind of like Aaron Freeman. They're the only two that I know that can have their voice change so dramatically for different
Okay.
songs and different characters, you know?
Everything will. It's so typical, so triangular. And then the tragedy entangled bad everything on everything your parents told us. Go back to Pakistan and tell your mother it's all over.
Yeah. Wow. So that's great. And again, I can't recommend that album enough. So could you talk just for a minute or two about like how you got the label like back up and running? And you had mentioned that working with Mark was one of the things. So between that and your dub albums, is that kind of like what sparked getting it back off the ground?
Yeah, and there was a nice gentleman who wanted to put out Three Colors stuff, and he ended up releasing a CD, and he did a lot of work on it. He put together a nice booklet, but it sounded so bad. I actually got like angry mail from fans. I ended up asking him to take it down and started harvesting the original tapes, or as many I could find, or remastering from the vinyls. So I'm slowly trying to put it back Three Colors. Get
Okay.
all the music kind of chronologically, just as a historical thing. Get it all out. So I'm going through the old tapes, and so we baked some tapes recently and discovered some fun songs to mix. And that's kind of a huge project, but it's been fun. And it got the band, all the guys from the original band, and Jeff, actually the original drummer from Miracle Legion, came down and played on a song that we redid from back then. So, and that's just been another reason to continue the label. So to have that sort of history from the Boston days to now, releasing new music or different music. So it's kind of like a thing like Bird Feeder that was started back then, but it's fresh and new now.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just recently recorded some new singer-songwriters that are up and coming, doing their thing too. So starting to widen the horizons at the label, which is fun.
Yeah, I mean that's so cool, man. I mean, it's just just going onto the Soul Selects website and looking at the different records and everything. Just so great to see an independent artist like yourself just doing it on their own and having these great records being made. So is there like one specific like pressing plant where like all of your stuff comes from?
So far, we've used two. One called Gotta Groove in Ohio, and I think they've just moved somewhere.
Okay.
And then we recently discovered one outside of Philly called Studio 4.
Okay.
So those are the two companies we're using right now.
So but you have complete control over, you give them everything that you want. You say, okay, this is going to be the front, this is going to be the back, the jacket itself.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm.
The record. And then what about like if you want to do like a specific color for the vinyl or like a specific design for the vinyl itself?
Yeah, they'll do that. And Studio 4 is remarkable. They'll even do like one-offs of certain colors.
Okay.
Which is wild. Yeah, there's so many options now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. And so but it still takes what? How many months typically?
I've been shocked lately, like how fast their turnaround was. That one album we made recently, the artwork was going to take longer than the making of the vinyl, and it came back to us within a matter of like 2 months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty fast.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. But since you're an artist and you're kind of living in a streaming world. How do you feel about streaming? Now, again, I mentioned that, you seem to be a little vocal because I've seen, your social media posts of, this is how much revenue I've generated.
just to show people. uh yeah, it's a weird thing, as you do this thing for this long, and to watch how it's evolved and what's happening now, and to know that the fee paid to the musicians is so minuscule. It's frustrating, it's tough, but at the same time, like, if I'm gonna have a little label, then that means I'm in the game. I gotta check out what the game's doing, like what's happening, so it's like, this is the reality, this is what's happening. Are you in or are you out? So I actually, signed up as a business expense to check out Spotify,
Mm-hmm.
and to think that that guy now has like $7 billion is horrifying. And maybe they should figure out a way to make it more equitable.
Right.
Most definitely.
Right.
Like, how long can that model go? No, you see these turnovers of technology so quickly now. It changes so fast, everything, and the dynamics of it all changing. So for me, as a creative person, just to continue to just make the content and then figure out the other stuff at the back end as best as I can, or work with people that know how to do this stuff and are into it. Because
Right.
it's pretty frustrating and sucky when you get right down to it.
Well, at least you have something that you can control, where if somebody discovers you or somebody discovers one of your projects, they'll be able to say, oh, okay, I like that a lot. I want to buy, this. I want to buy this album, or I want to, vinyl album, or I want to, pay for the download of this album. So you have something that you can still control, where
Exactly.
you might be able to make, some revenue then.
Exactly. That's the key. It's just to maintain the ownership of it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I won't keep you too much longer here, but just speaking as yourself, as just a regular music fan, we've asked this question of, we had Tomato, Chris from Sound of Urchin on, and Bill in the past, and we had Claude on as well, but I don't think we had bothered him with this. But but could you make a Mount Rushmore of your top favorite artists? I would imagine maybe Neil Young would be on there, but I'm not going to speak for you at all.
Absolutely. Let's put him up there.
Okay. So who else are your guys? It doesn't have to be one specific person, but just either artists or like bands in general.
So far we said Neil. The two Bobs, Bob Marley and Bob Dylan, I guess.
Nice.
The Beatles. I got to back up Van Morrison in the last couple of years, and goosebumps on my arms when he started singing.
Wow.
He was like next level. This is through this other band I have called Rogue Oliphant, with the Irish poet Paul Muldoon.
Yes.
We tour with Ireland and stuff, and we just recently made an album with Tony Visconti producing. So that's coming out in September. And it'll be on Soul Selects as well. And that has Carchel Rorden from the Pogues on bass, and David Mansfield's in the band, and Warren Zanes, who was in the Del Fuegos, is in the band.
Wow.
And Ray Kubian on drums, and Paul Muldoon is our lyricist and host, and we write the songs to his lyrics. So that's that. I can't remember why I brought that up, but yet another one of the many projects that's going down.
Wow, that's amazing, man. And there's so many different things. Do you have like a yearly routine? As far as I know, you travel to, like, how many months do you spend in Ireland then?
We were going to Ireland every other year.
Okay.
There for a while, yeah. And we were doing a monthly gig in the New York City Irish Art Center, where Paul would invite his literary friends and musical guests, and we were sort of the house band, basically.
Wow.
We've been doing that for the last 10 years. So there's a bunch of records and music made in that vein too. And that's been a super fun project, to just write music to. I really love writing music to, like, Mark Mulcahy's words, or Paul Muldoon's words. It's fun as a craft, just be like, all right, let's see what we can come up with here. So that's been a real fun collaboration.
Is there one like specific thing that you like to do? Like, would it be, work on your own stuff, or work on like a collaboration like that, or what's your favorite thing to do?
That's a really good question too. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I do love the thing about being a musician and how you get to work with other people. I do love that interaction and being in the studio and creating stuff. I love it so much. So I would go with that. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, I don't want to keep you any longer. I can't thank you enough.
I
And
really appreciate your support and spreading the music and talking about it. It's been my pleasure, Shane.
I would love to have you back. If there's something in particular that you want to talk about.
Let me mention this record then, since you asked. On January 31st, coming up in a couple of weeks, we're celebrating the record release of Chris Harford and Channel Collective, which is basically a group of Philly musicians, John Thompson in particular on horn, and his partner on drums, Justin Lee, and then Dion Pachi plays bass on this. And so we're releasing that on Soul Selects, and the record releases will be that day. We'll have vinyl, and it'll be out on the streaming services that day. So the album's called Margate Dreamland, and it's a beautiful instrumental record that I'm very proud of as well.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, that'll be the record release was at John and Peters in New Hope, Pennsylvania on January 31st.
How do you put together the band? Is it just something that you know we saw that you did a show with Mickey and Andrew not too long ago. I guess that was probably what a year or two ago at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
that was for a fundraiser.
right, like a charity fundraiser. But how do you typically put the band together?
It depends on the situation, really, on what's happening, what the gig is, what I'm doing. There's the newest member of Band of Changes is a kid named Jers Durkin out of Baltimore, who had been coming to the annual Thanksgiving show of Band of Changes at John and Peters for decades, it seemed like. And I somehow trusted him when he told me he could play drums, and over the years got to know him. So he did the show this year on Thanksgiving, and he's coming up next week to play that show again. And we're going to do some recording. And so it's just sort of like a feel thing and feel out a person, and you know that you want to try to make music together. And I also love having musicians put on the spot where they're meeting each other for the first time on stage, and they might know my stuff from different parts of my career.
Uh-huh.
The other musicians will know something else, but I don't expect them to play it like the record, so it keeps it fresh for me to play all these songs all these years.
Right.
What are they bringing to it?
Yeah.
Their expression, and let them go to town, that's really fun for me.
Yeah. It sounds like a bit of a Frank Zappa kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see that in a way. He's somebody I saw when I was in second grade on the Princeton campus.
Oh my God. That is amazing.
So I could see that, yeah, a bunch of people on stage, and obviously seeing P-Funk, and being like, wow, look at all these people.
Yeah.
Creating this thing that's massive.
Right.
So sometimes, to have four guitar players, I didn't blink an eye, but some people will be like, that's a crazy thing to do.
Right.
Or I'm like, is it really?
Well, again, thank you so much. I'd love to keep in touch, and we'd love to have you back on whenever we can arrange it. And you're certainly welcome anytime. If there's anything that we can help you with, we're happy to do it and honored.
Thank you, Shane. Really appreciate it, and give my best to your podcast, mate. And yeah, thanks for spreading the music. And we'll be in touch because there's going to be a lot more music coming out. We'll have to do something on the vinyl release of Beheaded, if nothing else.
Oh, we'd be honored.
This concludes our interview with Chris. Please, once again, if you haven't, go to soulselects.com, chrishartford.com, and hit us up on Patreon. I'll have links to all of the Chris stuff that we're talking about, And, as I had mentioned in the intro, an all-new episode of Shane's Ween Vinyl discussing the album Looking Out for Number 6. It's a fun little mini conversation, and you get tons of other cool Weencast material as well when you sign up with us on Patreon. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope to see you again soon.